My son, Ethan, stood before me in the grand dining room, his eyes burning with a chilling, avaricious light as he demanded I sign over my inheritance, my life's work, my entire estate. I refused, my voice calm but unyielding, thinking the confrontation was over. But a week later, he invited me to a family meeting for reconciliation. I arrived to find not a truce, but an ambush. Lawyers were waiting with a ready-made will, their pens poised like daggers. They slid the papers across the polished table, but I just smiled, a slow, knowing expression that made them shift uncomfortably. "It's funny," I said, my voice cutting through the tense silence. "I brought a guest, too." Their faces turned ashen as the door behind me swung open. This betrayal was about to become their biggest, and final, mistake. The dining room smelled of cold, day-old coffee and the damp wood of a house grieving in the rain. Framed family photos lined the walls, a gallery of happier times, their silver frames glinting under the chandelier's dim, sorrowful glow. My son, Ethan, paced the length of the room like a caged animal, the expensive click of his Italian loafers against the antique hardwood a sharp, irritating rhythm. His wife, Chloe, sat across from me at the massive table, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against its surface. Each click was a needle prick in my already frayed nerves. The old grandfather clock in the corner, a relic from my own father, ticked louder than it should have, each second slicing through the thick, suffocating silence that punctuated Ethan's shouts. "You're sitting on my future, Dad." Ethan's voice cracked, his face a blotchy, unattractive red. "Do you think you can just hold on to everything forever? It's my birthright." I gripped the edge of my heavy whiskey glass, the amber liquid inside untouched. My pulse hammered a frantic beat against my ribs, but I forced my voice to remain low and steady. "This is my home, Ethan. The business is my life's work. They are governed by my rules." Chloe leaned forward, her lips curling into a smile that never reached her cold, calculating eyes. "Let's be reasonable, Arthur. You're not eternal." She slid a stack of papers across the vast expanse of the table, my old will, its edges worn and familiar. Her nails, painted a deep, vampiric red, flashed under the light, as sharp and pointed as her words. "You're holding them back. Their dreams, their life. Their life." As if my 4 decades of grinding, of building a network of luxury car dealerships from a single, dusty lot, meant less than their fleeting, materialistic whims. I stared at the papers but didn't touch them. Ethan stopped his pacing, his eyes burning with something far uglier than simple anger. It was greed, stark and undisguised, mingled with a desperate sense of entitlement. "You always made me live in your shadow," he spat, the words laced with a venom that shocked me. "Those loans you gave me for my businesses? They were pocket change compared to what you're hoarding now. Loans." The word was a deliberate, twisting knife. I had paid for his 3 failed startups, his sports cars, his lavish European vacations, all under the misguided belief that I was showing him my love. My mistake. The clock ticked again, a relentless, indifferent metronome. A photograph of my late wife, Margaret, watched me from the wall, her gentle smile frozen in a time before our son had become this stranger. I wondered what she would say if she could see him now. "Enough." My voice cut through the room, sharper and louder than I intended. I stood, my heavy chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Get out. Both of you." Ethan froze, his mouth half open in stunned disbelief. Chloe's predatory smile vanished, her eyes narrowing into slits. She snatched the papers from the table, clutching them like a weapon as she rose to her feet. "This isn't over, Arthur," she said, her voice like ice. Ethan stormed toward the door, his shoulder deliberately brushing against a framed photo on his way out. It tilted on its hook but didn't fall. The front door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. I sank back into my chair, the room suddenly, overwhelmingly quiet. Rain tapped against the tall windows, a steady, mournful drumbeat. The old will sat on the table, its presence a mockery of the family I thought I had. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the worn paper, but stopped. My chest tightened with a complex mix of shock and something hotter, something harder. Anger, yes, but also a cold, clarifying resolve. "You will regret this," I whispered to the empty room, not sure if I was talking to them or to myself. The clock ticked on, indifferent. I stood, my legs feeling heavier than they should, and walked toward my study. The key to my desk drawer felt cold and solid in my pocket. Whatever was coming, I would be ready for it. My study smelled of old leather, aging books, and the faint, pleasant aroma of pipe tobacco, a sanctuary from the storm that raged both outside and within me. Rain lashed against the tall, mullioned windows, blurring the world beyond into a wash of gray. I sat at my large, mahogany desk, the green glass of the banker's lamp casting a weak, circular glow over a pile of letters and photographs. The clock on the shelf ticked, its steady rhythm a cruel metronome, pulling me back to moments, to memories, I would rather forget. My fingers trembled as I unlocked and opened a deep drawer, revealing a stack of papers tied with a faded blue ribbon. Margaret's letters. Her handwriting, all elegant loops and graceful flourishes, stared up at me. I untied the ribbon, a familiar tightness in my throat. One letter, dated years ago, caught my eye. "You are always so strong for everyone else, Arthur," she had written. "But please don't forget to live for yourself, my love." I clenched the fragile paper in my fist, a wave of guilt twisting in my chest. I had lived for her, for Ethan, for the business, for everyone but myself. And this was my reward. My mind drifted back to Ethan's first car, a sleek, black convertible I had bought him the day he announced he was dropping out of college. He had grinned then, a genuine, unforced smile, and called me his hero. I had beamed with a foolish, paternal pride, thinking my generosity was enough to set him on the right path. Later, I had funded his series of ill-conceived startups, a boutique coffee roaster, a high-end dog walking service, a disastrous tech venture. Each one had crashed and burned, taking a significant chunk of my capital with it. I had told myself it was fine, that he was learning, that he would eventually find his way. Margaret had warned me, her voice soft but firm from her hospital bed in her final weeks. "He needs to stand on his own 2 feet, Arthur. Your love is not a substitute for his own character." I hadn't listened. Not then. The clock ticked louder, pulling me back to the present. I set her letter down and dug deeper into the drawer. A contract surfaced, its edges yellowed with age. A loan agreement I had drafted for Ethan 3 years ago. 6 figures. No interest, and no repayment schedule. My jaw tightened as I scanned the document. He had called it an investment, a seed fund, but it was a lifeline, one he had squandered on a lifestyle he hadn't earned. The numbers stared back at me, a stark, unforgiving map of my own blindness. I leaned back, the old leather chair creaking in protest. The study, usually my refuge, now felt smaller, its walls closing in. A silver-framed photo of Margaret sat on the corner of my desk, her eyes kind but seemingly piercing. I touched the frame, my fingers lingering on the cool metal. She had died holding my hand, her breath shallow, her last words a whispered plea to protect our family. I had failed her. I had failed to protect our family from itself. Enough. I grabbed my phone and dialed Ron Alastair, an old friend and a bulldog of a lawyer who had seen me through worse. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm but cautious. "Arthur? Everything okay?" "I need your take on something, Ron," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's serious. Name the time and place. You know I'm there for you." No hesitation. That was Ron. "Tomorrow. The steakhouse downtown. Noon. I'll be there," he promised. He paused. "Are you sure you're all right, my friend?" I didn't answer. I just ended the call. The letter from Margaret lay open on my desk, her gentle words a quiet rebuke to my years of enabling. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my pocket. The rain hadn't let up, and neither would I. I stood, my shadow long against the towering bookshelves, and left the study. By the time I reached the front door, my coat was on, the letter a warm weight against my chest. The car engine roared to life, a powerful, angry sound in the quiet night. I drove into the heart of the storm, the road ahead as unclear as my next move. Rain pounded the streets of downtown Chicago, turning the sidewalks into slick, black mirrors. I parked outside the steakhouse, its neon sign flickering a hazy red through the downpour. My fingers brushed against the letter in my pocket, Margaret's words a tether to my newfound resolve. The restaurant's heavy door creaked as I stepped inside, the rich smell of grilled meat and old money hitting me. Ron sat at a corner table, his shock of gray hair catching the dim light. He waved me over, his easy smile fading as he saw the expression on my face. "Rough night," he said, pushing a mug of black coffee toward me. "A rough decade," I replied, shrugging off my dripping coat. "Ethan and Chloe came by yesterday. They want everything. Now." Ron's eyes narrowed. "They've got a hell of a nerve." "What did you do?" "I told them to get out." I sipped the coffee. It was bitter and hot. "But they're not done, Ron. I can feel it." The restaurant hummed around us. The clinking of plates, the low murmur of conversations, the persistent hiss of the rain outside. I glanced around, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. A man in a dark coat sat near the bar, his cap pulled low, his eyes flicking in our direction before darting away. I shook it off as paranoia and focused back on Ron. He leaned forward, his voice low. "They might try to contest the will. Claim you're not of sound mind. Ethan is impulsive, but Chloe, she's sharp. Dangerous." I nodded, my jaw tight. "I know. That's why I need to move fast." "Protect your assets first," Ron advised. "Get a new lawyer, someone they don't know. A specialist in estate litigation. Someone who will bury them in so much paperwork they won't know which way is up." I pulled out a small notebook, jotting down his words. "New will. Lockdown accounts. Estate litigator." My pen moved quickly, each stroke a step towards regaining control. The door creaked open again. My eyes flicked back to the bar. The man in the cap was gone, his drink untouched. A chill, cold and distinct, ran through me. "You're not just fighting for money, Arthur," Ron said, his voice softer now. "You're fighting for your life, for your legacy. They underestimated you. Prove them wrong." I met his gaze, a spark catching in my chest. "I will." I grabbed my phone and dialed the number of a law firm Ron had mentioned in the past, a firm known for its ruthless efficiency. "My name is Arthur Crawford," I said, my voice low and clear. "I need an appointment with your best estate lawyer. As soon as possible." The receptionist promised to call me back. I hung up, my pulse steady for the first time in days. Ron clapped my shoulder. "That's the Arthur I know. The one who doesn't back down." I managed a half smile, but my eyes drifted back to the bar. The empty glass. The man in the cap. Who was he? I stood, tossing cash on the table. "I'll call you soon," I told Ron, already moving toward the door. Outside, the rain was merciless. I scanned the street, my breath catching in my throat. A shadow moved in the alley across the road, too quick to identify. My car keys bit into my palm as I unlocked the door and slid inside. "You don't know who you're dealing with," I muttered, the words lost in the roar of the engine. The road stretched ahead, slick and dark. The private detective's office was a squat, brick relic in a forgotten part of the city, its windows streaked with years of grime. I clutched a folder of documents, old contracts, the unpaid loan agreement, my knuckles white. The shadow from the alley still lingered in my mind, a nagging itch of paranoia I couldn't scratch. Inside, the air smelled of stale cigarettes and damp paper. Frank Callahan, the PI Ron had recommended, sat behind a cluttered desk, his tie loose, a coffee mug balanced precariously on a stack of files. He looked up, his eyes sharp despite the dark bags beneath them. "Crawford. You're early." "Couldn't sleep," I said, dropping into a creaky chair. The folder hit his desk with a thud. "What have you got for me?" Frank slid a thick manila envelope toward me. "Your son is in deep. Over 50 grand in personal debt, cars, credit cards, you name it. A bad bet on some crypto venture." He leaned back, a humorless smirk on his face. "Chloe is cleaner, but not by much. She's obsessed with maintaining the illusion of old money. Spends a fortune to keep up appearances." I tore open the envelope. Bank statements, receipts, a photo of Ethan posing with a Rolex he couldn't possibly afford. Then, a photocopied letter, tucked away in the back. It was in Chloe's tight, controlled script. "Arthur clings to his money like a dying man to air. But he's not eternal. We just need to be patient, and we will take what is rightfully ours." My stomach churned, but a cold, hard smile tugged at my lips. "Where did you find this?" "In a box of Ethan's old things he dumped at a storage unit," Frank said. "Sloppy. Both of them." I traced the venomous words with my finger. The fluorescent light in the office buzzed, casting long, ugly shadows. I had built a life for them, sacrificed my own dreams, my nights, my years, and this was their gratitude. My fingers tightened on the letter, crumpling its edge. "Anything else?" Frank shrugged. "Ethan is desperate. Chloe's pride is her leash. Use that. You've got more than enough here to rattle their cage." I nodded, slipping the papers back into my folder. The weight of it was grounding. Each document was a brick in the wall I was building around myself. "Keep digging," I said, standing. "I want everything." Back in my study, the house was too quiet. I spread the papers across my desk, the clock ticking like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. Chloe's letter lay open, her words a taunt. I began to write in my notebook. Ethan, debts. Chloe, pride. My mind raced, piecing together a plan, its shape still nebulous but its intent clear. The documents were my first weapon. I leaned back, the chair groaning. Margaret's photo watched me from the desk, her eyes soft but unyielding. I had been weak for too long, blinded by my love for a son who had traded it for cash. "No more." I sent a text to Ron. "It's starting." A creak echoed from downstairs, sharp against the rain's drone. My heart lurched. I had locked the front door. I was sure of it. I stood, the folder still in my hand, and moved silently into the hall. The house felt alive, its shadows shifting and breathing. Someone was here. Or I was finally losing my mind. Either way, I wasn't backing down. The new law firm's conference room smelled of power and polished wood, its panoramic windows framing Chicago's rain-slicked towers. I sat at the head of the table, my hands folded, the folder of documents tucked neatly under my arm. The door opened, and Ethan's lawyer, a wiry man with a smirk that begged to be wiped off, strode in. He dropped a stack of papers on the table, the sound a sharp, deliberate challenge. "Mr. Crawford," he began, his voice oily and condescending. "Your son has grave concerns about your capacity to manage your substantial estate." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "You're getting older. Mistakes can happen." I clenched my jaw, my fingers digging into the folder. The clock on the wall ticked, each second a test of my restraint. "My mind is sharper than your client's finances," I said, my voice low and even. The lawyer's smirk faltered, but he pressed on, rattling off a litany of baseless accusations, mismanagement, neglect, irrational spending, all lies spun to paint me as incompetent, to steal what I had spent a lifetime building. The door opened again, and a woman entered, her heels clicking with a quiet, confident purpose. Eliza Martin, my new lawyer, carried herself like a storm held in check. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharp as she set her briefcase down. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice as cool and clear as glass. "Your claims are as thin as this paper." She slid a single document across the table. The lawyer scoffed, but Eliza didn't flinch. "You cite mismanagement, yet Mr. Crawford's accounts are impeccable. His investments have outperformed the market for the last decade. Care to explain that? Or shall we perhaps discuss your client's considerable debts instead?" I exhaled, a knot I hadn't realized I was holding loosening in my chest. The lawyer stammered, flipping through his notes, his manufactured confidence crumbling. Eliza leaned back, a faint, lethal smile playing on her lips. The clock ticked on, now marking her rhythm, not his. After the meeting, we stood in the hall. "They're desperate," Eliza said. "I've seen far worse opponents, Arthur. We will crush them." I chuckled, the sound foreign in my own ears. "You seem to be enjoying this." She grinned, a genuine spark in her eyes. "Justice has a nice ring to it." Back in her office, a small, elegant space lined with books, she pulled out a file. "Their case is weak, but they won't give up. Ethan is impulsive. Chloe is calculating. You need to watch your back." "My eyes are open," I assured her. She paused, her pen hovering over a page. "Wait a minute, this," she circled a line in my original estate documents, her brow furrowing. Then she looked up, a glint in her eye. "This changes everything." "What is it?" I leaned forward, my pulse spiking. She slid the document toward me, her voice a low, excited whisper. "A loophole. An inheritance clause Margaret insisted on years ago. Trust me, Arthur. They will never see this coming." I took the file. It felt heavy with promise. The rain had eased, and a sliver of sunlight was breaking through the clouds. I left the firm, the city alive and buzzing around me. Whatever Eliza had found, it was my next move. And I was more than ready to play it. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 7, its deep, resonant tones marking the beginning of the end. I stood in the living room, the air thick with the scent of damp wood and old memories. The doorbell rang, sharp and unwelcome. I smoothed my shirt, steadied my breath, and opened the door. Chloe stood on the porch, her coat glistening with rain, her smile as polished and false as her designer handbag. "Arthur," she said, her voice like syrup. "I came to apologize. We got carried away." Her eyes flicked past me, scanning the room like a thief casing a vault. I nodded, gesturing her inside. "Tea?" She followed, her heels clicking on the hardwood. I busied myself in the kitchen, the hiss of the kettle filling the tense silence. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her purse perched on her lap like a shield. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "Ethan is just stressed. You know how he gets." "Stressed," I echoed, setting a cup before her. My hand brushed against a document on the coffee table, a transfer of a significant portion of my liquid assets to a charitable trust, signed that very morning on Eliza's guidance. Chloe's gaze darted to it, her lips tightening for a fraction of a second. "Got you," I thought. "We all make mistakes," I said, my voice soft, inviting her to dig deeper into her own grave. She prattled on, her voice a calculated lullaby of remorse and affection, but she slipped, her greed getting the better of her. "Our future depends on this family staying strong," she said, her eyes betraying a proprietary gleam. I stood. "Let me walk you out." At the door, she paused. "Think about what I said," she urged, her voice too sweet. I nodded, closing the door behind her. Through the window, I watched her linger by her car, her phone pressed to her ear, her whispers sharp against the rain. She thought she was being discreet. She wasn't. I pulled out my own phone and dialed Eliza. "She took the bait," I said. The clock ticked, marking the moment. The trap was set. The meeting was set for a week later, at my house. For reconciliation, the invitation read. I arrived to find Ethan and Chloe flanking their lawyer at my dining room table. A new will was laid out, its edges crisp, waiting for my signature. I took my seat, my pulse steady, a faint smile on my face. Mr. Crawford, their lawyer began, sliding the will toward me. Sign this, and we can put this unpleasantness behind us. I picked up the pen, turning it in my hand. The room held its breath. Funny, I said, my voice calm. I brought a guest, too. The door to the study opened, and Eliza Martin walked in, her briefcase in hand. She was followed by a man in a gray suit, his expression carved from stone. Agent Daniel Harper, FBI, he said, his voice cutting the air. He dropped a stack of papers on the table. The thud echoed like a gavel. We have evidence of document forgery, attempted fraud, and conspiracy, tied to Ethan and Chloe Crawford. Forged signatures, altered contracts, Frank's digging, Eliza's strategy. My plan. Chloe gasped, her face draining of all color. Ethan's chair scraped as he recoiled, his eyes wide with terror. This is a mistake, he stammered. The lawyers scrambled, their confidence vaporizing. These are felonies, Harper said, his gaze unrelenting. You will answer for them. I leaned back, the will untouched before me. The clock ticked, marking their utter defeat. Dad, Ethan croaked. I didn't mean it. Tell them. I met his eyes, my own voice cold. You meant every word. I stood and nodded to Harper. Thank you, Agent. Dad, please. Ethan lurched forward. Chloe clutched the table, silent, her eyes burning with a mixture of fear and pure hatred. I paused at the door, the handle cool under my palm. Their pleas followed me, but I didn't look back. The door clicked shut, the sound final. The rest would be a matter for the courts, for the newspapers. My part was done. I walked to my car, the city's hum a distant pulse, the folder of Margaret's letters a trophy of a justice finally served. The charity office in Chicago buzzed with a hopeful energy, its walls lined with children's drawings and brightly colored thank you notes. I sat at a long table with a group of volunteers, the scent of fresh paper and coffee a comforting anchor. A young woman across from me beamed, holding up a blueprint for a new after-school program. Your donations are changing lives, Mr. Crawford, she said, her voice full of a genuine, infectious enthusiasm. I nodded, a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. The office door creaked open, and for a fleeting moment, I heard the echo of older doors, ones I had closed for good. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Ethan and Chloe Crawford sentenced in fraud case. I pictured them in a courtroom, their faces pale, their future sealed by a judge's cold, final verdict. Prison time. Fines. Ruin. I felt no anger, only a quiet resolve. They had built their own cage, brick by brick. I swiped the alert away, the lively chatter of the volunteers pulling me back to the present. Later, I walked with Eliza along the shore of Lake Michigan, the water glinting under the bright spring sun. Her scarf fluttered in the breeze, her laughter sharp and clear as she recounted a recent case she had won. You're tougher than you look, Arthur, she said, nudging my arm. I learned from the best, I replied, her grin infectious. We stopped at a bench, the city's magnificent skyline sharp against the brilliant blue sky. I pulled the worn photo of Margaret from my wallet. She would be proud, I said, my voice soft. Of this. Of us. Eliza's hand rested on my shoulder, steady and warm. Back in my new, smaller apartment, the study was quiet, the grandfather clock ticking a gentle, peaceful rhythm. I sat at my desk, a blank sheet of paper before me, my pen heavy with purpose. The words came slowly, each one a thread in the legacy I wanted to leave. Not a legacy of wealth, but one of truth. Justice is a form of strength, I wrote. Hold it close, and it will carry you through the darkness. The letter was for those who would come after, a guide through the long shadows of greed. Margaret's photo watched me from the shelf, her eyes kind, urging me on. I sealed the letter, its weight a promise kept. The porch of my apartment called to me, the night sky vast and pricked with a million stars. I stepped outside, the air cool and clean, the world still and quiet. The clock inside ticked softly, its rhythm the heartbeat of my newfound peace. I looked up at the stars, a map of futures yet unwritten, and for the first time in more than a decade, I felt whole.